Hey everybody, it's Denise Siegel, and it is a cloudy and freezing cold day down here in the Nashville area where we're getting snow flurries and uncharacteristically cold weather. Like it's something like 20 degrees out or something crazy like that right now. It feels below that actually. And next week it's gonna be 70. So we're getting some weird weather. So a couple of things I wanted to go over here. Last fall, I had a dream that I was that there was a tsunami of like mud, basically. And me and my family were just pushed forward with the tsunami of mud. And by the end of it, we were stripped of all of our clothes and we're in this casket that had wheels, and a bunch of other people were in the casket with us. It was like a pine box with wheels that was like a casket. So the metaphor was clear that it was about um, some kind of looming financial crisis that was going to impact everyone. The other dream I had was that I was going on an airplane that was really shoddy, and the only seats that were on there were like lawn chairs. And we were going to Hungary, which is obviously a metaphor for the democracy that we're currently in right now. Um, so this has been on my mind. We've seen costs go up. We've seen SNAP benefits and all kinds of problems really in the last year. And um, frankly, the system as it is doesn't seem very sustainable to me. And in the short term, when does it start to unravel? Because in the long term, I think we have a bigger problem coming down the road with our markets and just sort of having to reevaluate things on a multiple levels. One is clearly that we're going to have a Uranus Mars conjunction in the sixth house, which is what set off the Civil War here in the United States in opposition to the moon. And it's going to repeat again in 2028. So this implies that we're going to go, there's going to be sort of an escalation of modern Civil War. I wouldn't say it's going to be like the Civil War of the Civil War, but it's going to be more in keeping with civil wars that we see around the world uh, in other countries that go from democracies to anocracies or from autocracies into anocracies. So it's not going to look like it did in the last Civil War. It'll be much more chaotic and um, much more like, you know, uh, I've gone over it many times, but what I've seen is fighting in the streets and domestic violence and all this domestic, not violence, but domestic terrorism violence on the soil. I have some theories about how it will unfold, but I'm just going to keep it at that. I had some visions about things, but I've written about that on my Substack. I'm not going to go over that here. So I'm thinking that there are signs and indicators that the economy is having problems. The real estate market is slowing down. And we talked a little bit about the nodes controlling the real estate market. The nodes have moved into position where they're going to move into Aquarius, which is usually when the housing bubble bursts and the real estate market starts to have serious problems. That's going to happen next year. And then when it goes into Capricorn, that is really when it bottoms out in price. And that's in a couple of years from now. So we're in a trend. We've hit our peak. We're on the downturn of that cycle. And it'll take a while before we move back to the upcycle. And there's probably a lot of logical reasons, like there was last time, about why people wouldn't want to buy real estate right now. So that indicator is worrisome. The market is, woo, everybody thinks it's going so great and everything, but this is a similar thing we saw what happened before the 1929 major stock market plunge, and even before 2008. Everybody was all in, saying everything was great, and I there's just a lot of indicators that tell us, not to mention the fact that we have these crazy tariffs, we have all these other things going on. We have people in charge of our government who are not, to be kind, are not in any way, shape, or form experts in their field. And all of this is happening while we're doing very crazy things like blowing up boats for no apparent reason, supposedly because they're supposed to be narco terrorists, but that's not even a thing. And we don't know for sure that that's true. We have no proof of that. There's just a lot going on. And the obvious decline of our president, from being a malignant narcissist to now a malignant narcissist who seems to have uh, dementia, I guess, or something's going on there. So this is a really precarious place we're in, and next year it is going to explode. Uh, so before we get to that period, I want to talk about a period coming up in March of 2026, and there will be an eclipse in February, which does indicate pushback against the Trump regime, and probably will come to culmination in the summer when that Mars Uranus opposition happens. So let's talk a little bit about the economic piece that's going to play a role in this. We can only say is some massive pushback, some major change that's coming, and we're going to see unfolding over the next several years. So I'm going to show you what I've been looking at. Now, the New York Stock Exchange is my go-to for kind of indicating the economic system of the United States and really the world, because we are the wealthiest country on the planet. And if the stock market tanks, 58% of all the population has money in the market now. And that's a lot of people. That's the majority of people in the country. When you consider a certain percentage of kids or people are children, that's a massive amount of people in the stock market through their 401ks, their IRAs, all those type of things, mutual funds. Everybody, almost everyone has money in the stock market now. The other thing that's an indicator is that all of our major corporations that employ people are in the stock market. So if the stock market crashes, even if like in 2019, 29, when a very small percentage of people were invested in the stock market, like something like 10%, we still had a massive residual situation happen where Neptune started going through the second house, which is jobs, and people lost their jobs because banks collapsed, institutions collapsed, institutional employers, because companies collapsed, everything sort of fell apart, and it trickled down, unfortunately, in the wrong way towards the average person who lost their job, and deflation happened, and it just became a giant mess, right? So we sort of put a little bit of a stopper on that kind of unfolding mess in 2008, but the system was never really properly fixed. I think we all know that. It wasn't the best bailout situation. And now we are facing, it looks like to me, in the stock market chart, some worrying things that I'm just going to show you. So March 6, 2026 is when I believe around this period. So it may happen a few days before, it might happen a week or so after. We're going to see the moon move from being where it is now, which is right on Jupiter, which is the over optimism and this feeling like the good days are here and they're never going to go away, to moving onto the Neptune point. This is significant, and this, I don't know why this is doing this now. My I need to call my computer. I'm gonna have to go back to now, because this happened last time too. I don't know why this is occurring, but this is annoying that it keeps doing this. It's kind of not properly calculating when I do that. So, okay, so I'm going to move forward to March and just do it this way so you can see. You can see that in this period, a number of things happen. I talked a little bit about Uranus squaring Jupiter, opposing Mercury, ruler of jobs and money, squaring Venus now by this point on Pluto, with Pluto and Mars here on the angles opposing. So you've got this big grand square set up. So there's a lot of tension. Uranus at this point, it looked like before was actually on Mercury. So I don't know if this is messed up or not. But anyway, Uranus is here on the sun. So this is a major change too. And it's squaring, it's sort of triggering this big square. But the main thing I really am worried about is the move from the progressed moon being on Jupiter, which is the sort of happy-go-lucky, everything's going to be great, everybody's emotionally thinking, sort of being, their emotions are exaggerated and positive, and people are optimistic, to its move to Neptune and opposing the Saturn. Because here's the deal, that axis is the axis that seems to trigger major, major problems in the stock market. This particular configuration, when things move across it, causes problems. And normally it happens in the fall. But because of because of the quarterly reports that the government puts out, but the government isn't doing that now. And maybe that's why this is going to happen in March, when other companies and new numbers come in and people realize that the fourth quarter was not so fucking great, excuse my language. And people get freaked out. Neptune is on the south node and Saturn. And people contract and decide to sell more and kind of freak out. And this could trigger some kind of market crash. Now, I think it's possible, okay, that, you've got a Jupiter square here, Neptune, Jupiter as well. It's possible that it could be mitigated, everything is possible. We have, anything can be managed if it's done properly. The problem is, we have people in charge who are not necessarily great at handling these sorts of things. Now, long term, I think this might be some kind of freak out. And long term, we have other aspects, which we have Pluto in Aquarius right now, right? So we know the rise of AI and the people is coming, and people are, and eventually, we've heard already that 30,000 jobs are going to be lost at Amazon, and 75% of all workers, I think, are going to be, in the next couple of years, are going to be replaced by AI and robots for Amazon, which is like 600,000 jobs. We've eviscerated our federal government, fired hundreds of thousands of people there. As Amazon goes to this sort of AI model, that other companies are going to also follow suit. And then we're going to have a very shrinking workforce and higher unemployment as another thing. And that's a problem longer term that I'm not going to get into now, but it is something that is going to cause another problem down the road. So this problem is more, I think, a traditional big correction in the market and potentially a potential market downturn. What triggers it? I don't know, but I can tell you there is an eclipse, and I didn't really look at it. I'm going to load that up and see what it looks like in the stock market chart, because I looked at it in other charts, but not this one. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and show you it in the US Constitution chart as well, but I'm going to load that up. So I'll pause this for a second, come back. Okay, so we have the solar eclipse is happening February 17th of next year. So we're going to look at that and in the New York Stock Exchange chart. So that's happening. I'm not gonna do that because it seems to have problems when I do this. So February, what am I doing? Let's start here. Okay, February 16th or 17th, sorry. Yeah, 17th. Stupid thing. Okay. Okay, so February 17th. So we've got it right at 28 degrees of Aquarius. I know this because it's happening exactly on my moon, which is a lot of fun. Okay, so we have it right there. So it's in the seventh house. Okay, and Saturn and then the Neptune on the south node. So it seems like, and the nodes are here. So this does seem like, and here the moon is moving closer to that 27 opposition to Saturn. So it would appear, and it's also squaring the moon. The sun is starting to square the moon here. So it seems like this is starting to, people are maybe at this point, not long after this does imply, and Uranus is on the sun, that people are going to start to rethink things and feel a little bit less as it's squaring. This eclipse is also squaring the sun, that maybe there's more trouble brewing. And this might be the thing that sets off, this one, people wanting to sell coming up in March. So that early March is only a couple weeks after this. So this could indicate that as well. Now, now it's interesting because I also, looking at Trump's chart, you can see some interesting things happening at this eclipse. Now, Trump himself was born on an eclipse, and so he's a little impervious to eclipses, it seems like. In fact, the big solar eclipse in Leo happened just, a year and what was it, the 2017, like 6 months into his presidency or something like that, which is interesting. So he came in right on an eclipse, like a major eclipse, which there would have been one in February, that maybe wasn't a total eclipse, but would have sort of also kind of indicated that they were close to his ascendant and descendant at the time. So, and his Pluto. So let's look at this here. The eclipse will be February 17th next year. And we're going to see Pluto is starting to go through his sixth house of health, which indicates changes in his health picture. We know he's had some health issues, but this also kind of implies that this eclipse happening in his sixth house implies this could be bad for his health. And this might imply that there will be some health issues. That doesn't necessarily mean, he's going to die or anything. So I'm just saying that he could start having some more serious health problems, especially because it's opposing his Mars. It's squaring Uranus right at the top of his chart. And it's also opposing his moon. So he's got a big grand square happening with this eclipse. And let's not forget that every time Uranus was at 27 degrees, so it's been back and forth the last couple of years, that's right near Algol, which is the fixed star that rules losing your head. And every time it was 27, 28 degrees, squaring his ascendant and his Mars right at the midpoint where Mercury is, right there. It's very exact. And the eclipse is right. So it's right on this grand square. He had assassination attempts against him. So I'm not saying that that's necessarily going to happen this time around. Also, the South Node is on the sun, but it certainly seems like his health is more precarious coming out of this eclipse, that there may be more. It also implies a lot of resistance against him and people galvanizing against him as it's an Aquarius, and him feeling embattled with that opposition to Mars and squaring the Uranus. Public favor changing and him feeling pressure of that. Now the moon is also close to that it's really pretty much on a square to his Mars. So he may seem more angry, more aggressive. And this is a little scary because he's already erratic with the Uranus node Sun conjunction and the South node Moon conjunction, which we talked a little bit about how serial killers and people who are sociopathic often have a lot of nodal conjunctions around major planetary bodies, and often in tight conjunction more than one. And Trump certainly has that. He has the moon with the south node, the north node on Uranus, and the sun. And this implies past lives in which you went down the dark road and you have a lot of shadow stuff. Now, there are people that have nodal conjunctions that is not true of. And usually it's maybe one planet. And it can also mean a bleed through from another lifetime. It has a lot of other meanings, but it is extraordinarily prevalent in people who are sociopaths and psychopaths. In fact, it's more common than not. And it is the one factor that I have seen over and over and over again, looking at criminal charts, that repeats. It's the percentages of it are higher than anything else in astrology. And so there is definitely a correlation. It doesn't mean it's a causation, but there's a correlation. Like I've said before, everybody who gets in a car accident is driving a car, but not everybody who drives a car gets in a car accident, right? So having a nodal configuration like this doesn't necessarily mean you're going to follow those dark impulses or that bleed through from another life in which there was shadow stuff. It can also mean that you lean into it and level up in this lifetime, deciding to tackle that issue and really being compelled to deal with that shadow stuff. In which case, if you do that, your whole life becomes better and you kind of have this massive breakthrough in your lifetime. Now, we know from Trump's behavior that that is not the case. He certainly did not choose that path to become a better person, go through therapy, become a spiritual person, start meditating and eating right and being a great, philanthropist. No, he actually has really dug into that nodal conjunction and that erraticism that is part of his natal chart. So when we see somebody like that with all of this pressure on them, that is an indicator that that they're going to act in more erratic and crazy ways, which may be the reason why by July and around this period, people start to really turn against him. And you see a proliferation of resistance against him. Now, we already know his poll numbers suck really bad. He's got like a 30% approval rating, which is unbelievably low. That's probably only his core MAGA people that are still with him. Pretty much everyone else has problems with him. It's important to note and to deal with going forward as he becomes more and more erratic and does crazier things. And I have this feeling, he might reach into areas that will piss off the MAGA base too. Some of them he's already done, like screwing over farmers, taking away SNAP benefits, destroying Medicare and Medicaid. But as these things and policies become part of people's daily lives, and also as people start to realize that the Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the executive branch, and pretty much the Supreme Court, and that Project 2025 was as much as he pretended or lied about the fact that he wasn't part of that, all of the architects of it are in his administration, and he is implementing it aggressively. Now, I've listened to a lot of psychologists talking about the cult of Trumpism and how it's very important not to shame people for their beliefs and for falling into this sort of weird spell that Trump has cast, and that we have to find a way to talk to people who have been misinformed and led down the primrose path. And I think that's important because at a certain point, they are going to reach their breaking point too, and we can't hold it. We have to think about them as having left a cult, not as bad people, people who have been seriously misled and misinformed. And we have to be able to open arm, kind of just let them back into society and accept their, accept their pain and their grievance, and sort of try to help them through become kind of being deprogrammed into reality. So this is probably the best way to deal with that. Now, I have a suspicion, though, that what we're going to see is something really radical that Trump might do that could push the mega base, really make their heads explode, which would be something like he's going to start with gun control, or he's going to try to take people's guns away. I mean, you got to think, if you want to be a dictator, if you want to be a tyrant, having more guns and people among the populace is a liability, right? And is potentially really dangerous for you and for the people trying to control everyone. At a certain point, and I don't know if it's this point or if it's later on, that might become a thing that could push the MAGA base out of being his base. And, we're also going to see ICE become sort of taken over by the Border Patrol, which is more aggressive than even ICE, coming up next year. And we're going to see an explosion of this really insane behavior on, with ICE and the Border Patrol, just grabbing people off the street. They're trying to go from 1,000 a day captures of people. And I'm saying capture because that's what it is. It's like, it's really abducting people, to 3,000 abductions a day. And that's 3 times what we're dealing with now. Okay. So we're talking about, as upset as people are now, that is going to ratchet things up twice, 3 times fold, right? We're also hearing about building of internment camps. An internment camp is supposed to be built in Utah for unhoused people, and using those unhoused people as slave labor. I don't know. I haven't done total research on it. I can't say for sure if that is 100% true, but I have heard that, and from some credible sources, but we'll see if that is true or if it really happens. But that is a very, very disturbing development. He's gone after people like Comey and other people he sees as his perceived enemies. And they've also instituted a program, which I talked about early on last November, that I saw coming, which was they're going to start combing through people's social media, and anyone who isn't on board with the extreme Christo-fascist right, they're going to start harassing. I don't know, potentially, like I had that dream back in 2020 that I was rounded up into this building and they were shooting liberals and people like me all around me, and it was freaking me out. I ran out and saw Steve Bannon eating a hot dog with 2 young men, and then he said, either you go to the prison or you go get murdered, and those were my options. And I knew that my gut back in the summer of 2020, Biden was going to win, but this whole bullshit was going to come roaring back at us. And that we were just going to get a little break from this. And I told everyone to enjoy the vacation, and it was coming back, and people got mad at me, and the rest is history. And I was right. I've been right about a lot of things. I'm not going to go into all of them. You guys watching me know that I'm more right than wrong. I'm not saying I'm always right, but I do have a tendency to be, even if it's not 100% the right time or 100% the right, exactly what I say, it's the spirit of it is pretty much on the money most of the time. The prediction I predicted, all the way back to the George Bush, Al Gore thing, which I had to look it up to see if it was even possible. I saw both of them winning, with George Bush inching out Al Gore. And I figured, and I actually predicted that, Al Gore would have been the popular vote, and George Bush would win the electoral vote and he would end up becoming president. And it hadn't happened in my lifetime. So I could not believe, I mean, it seemed ridiculous to me. I knew that was going to happen. So I can go back over many, many predictions going back years and years and years ago. In fact, even having dreams about this period of time back when I was a kid that other people who are my friends have heard me talk about, and unfortunately probably too much. But so I'm just saying what we're in for next year is going to be an escalation on a much grander scale. So let's look at the US Constitution signing chart and we'll talk a little bit about what's coming here. So this is and I also want to mention something. So people have been asking me about 3i Atlas. 3i Atlas, I've posted a few things on my Substack from this guy called the Angry Astronaut, who I trust his sort of take on it because he's really not somebody who's like interested in alien stuff. He is a space enthusiast who basically goes to launches and is really obsessed with the space program. He's very scientific in nature and he has a good astronomical basis and understanding of astronomy. So I mean, he's not a scientist, but he's a layperson who's an enthusiast of astronomy and science, science, technology, space related technology enthusiast. He has been doing a really good job of sort of updating the public with all the strange anomalies that have been being found that is not insane. Not all the You're going to find stuff out there that is completely bogus. I mean, there's so much BS out there about it. And Avi Loeb, who is a scientist from Harvard and professor, he's a professor of astronomy, and he's also a theoretical physicist, I believe. Has a Loeb scale of possibility of whether something is natural or artificial. He did this after Oumuamua. I'll just stop my share for a second and come back to this. So he did this after Oumuamua came through our solar system. Oumuamua was discovered, I think, in 2017, and there had been a bunch of dwarf planets, which at first they called them planets, discovered in the Kuiper Belt, which is or that maybe the Oort cloud. It's really far out past Pluto. So Pluto is one of the first objects found in that belt. And astronomers, Michael Brown and his team of people at Caltech started discovering other objects out there through mathematics and I think also light displacement. And they found what they called eventually called Eris and a number of other bodies, Sedna and a bunch of other ones. Now, and they kept discovering more and more of them, and other observatories started discovering them as well, because they were all looking in that area and found there's tons of these small planet-like sized, not too big. They're about the size of Pluto, sometimes a little bigger, sometimes smaller. Sort of really, really far out there, icy, kind of lumpy planetoid or dwarf planets. It's interesting that all of them have been named after very dark and creepy gods and goddesses. And the reason for that is all of the names of gods and goddesses that are not creepy and bad were taken by all the asteroids circulating in the asteroid belt closer to us between Jupiter and Saturn. No, is it between? I think it's between. No, it's between Venus and Jupiter. Can't remember right now. Anyway, it's some people theorized. I read a long time ago, like in Omni magazines, people theorized that there may have been a planet there at one time that was collided with and exploded into this asteroid belt. The biggest body in that asteroid belt is called Ceres. And Ceres, there's Vesta, there's Athena, Pallas Athena, and Juno, which are some of the major asteroids that we kind of look at as in astrology. because they have big goddess names, and also they're pretty close to us, and they are sort of the more significant. Ceres is actually quite a bit bigger than than Pluto, and it's a lot closer. It was when it was originally found, it was thought to be a planet, and it was downgraded to an asteroid and upgraded recently to being a dwarf planet. So Ceres is a dwarf planet. All those planets out in the Kuiper Belt are dwarf planets. And the thing is, um, to me, it was always a very, I would say, ominous thing that all of these dwarf planets were found out in the Kuiper Belt, and they were all given these really dark names. Like Eris is a goddess of strife, and she's kind of a guerrilla warfare person. Like, really, she throws an apple and she causes this big war to happen on Earth. And I mean, they're all pretty negative. Sedna is, abducted and then has her hands chopped off by her father. I mean, it's pretty dark shit. And I always thought this seems really like a bad omen for starting the 21st century with all these super creepy, dark kinds of, lore in these outer planets. And there are so many of them. There's almost one for every major planet is a dwarf planet. So I was trying to kind of correlate sort of a shadow side correlation. So maybe as a secondary rulership for shadow behavior in astrology. And I'm still thinking about that. And it's not so easy, but you could say Eris she's the sister of Aries. Um, but she's a goddess. Is she kind of like the dark side, the dark feminine side of sort of the destructive feminine? Maybe she's sort of, so you can think about, but it's a very different bunch of, and there's some of them are from you know, really sort of indigenous cultures that have a very different viewpoint and a very different sort of world take. So it's not so easy to correlate. So anyway, back to this. So Three Eye Atlas, I believe. So Avi Loeb, so is Hamaya Mea, whatever, I can't say it right now, is Amuamua. Now Hamaya, which is one of the outer dwarf planets in the Kuiper Belt, when Oumuamua was found in Hawaii by this observatory there, they named it that, thinking it was a dwarf planet. And as they watched it, they realized it was actually coming in towards the solar system, and it wasn't a dwarf planet. They thought it was. They didn't know what it was. It was super flat, and it was rotating, and it was doing all this. It was unusual, but they thought, okay, it's an interstellar object. It was the first interstellar object we'd ever seen. It came all the way into our solar system, and as it got right outside the sun, right past the sun, past perihelion, it sped up, and this got Avi Loeb thinking that maybe this is some kind of artificial object, and we don't really have any way to really. We're not looking for that. We're automatically going to this idea that everything that we observe out in space is natural, but the reality is that we are in a solar system that is part of galaxy, the Milky Way, which has 500 billion stars, and we're finding more and more that around all these stars are solar systems. And around all of these solar systems, we're finding exoplanets that have water on them and potential life. And if we have that many billions of stars in our galaxy alone, and there's literally countless, infinite, and what they found recently, more recently in the last few months, is um, that there is no Big Bang. When they went all the way, and when they looked all the way to where they thought the Big Bang would have started, they found only more galaxies past that. And now they're serious that there was no Big Bang, that the universe is infinite and it's constantly expanding. So there's probably hundreds of trillions of galaxies, and in each one there's hundreds of billions of stars, and the odds of us being alone are extraordinarily low. I mean, impossibly low. So what happens if you get an interstellar object that isn't natural, and we have a visitor from another solar system, another galaxy, some other place in our galaxy. Um, how would we be able to determine that? So Avi Loeb started thinking about that and decided that Oumuamua had a lot of qualities that didn't fit into a structure that we call cometary structure, and came up with the Loeb scale. So the Loeb scale is this 0 to 10, 0 being it's totally natural, to 10 being is completely artificial, and something in between is potentially, well, maybe it's natural, maybe it's not. So when this particular interstellar object came through our solar system, 3I Atlas, it's the third interstellar object. There was 2I Borisov, which was a typical comet, but it was interstellar. So this is the third one. I is for interstellar, and Atlas is after the observatory, the Atlas Observatory, which found this comet. Okay, so he noticed a bunch of anomalous things. One of them being the trajectory in which it was coming. It was coming through the path through our solar system, and it was going to reach all these different planets. And that particular trajectory is like got a 1 in 500 chance of being natural. There was just a list of anomalies, one being that there was all nickel without any iron, which is something you don't see very in normal comets, that it didn't have a normal tail, that it had a reverse tail, that it appeared to be massively giant. There's just a stack of these anomalies, and recently, the more recent anomalies are even more bizarre in that once it reached behind the sun, it sped up and its trajectory has changed slightly. Now, the other thing is that today it just came out that it's down, it's like offloaded, this massive tons and tons of its, we don't really know what's going on, but there's tons and tons of debris basically that have been released from the comet, and maybe it's dissolved, or maybe it's like offloading a bunch of stuff. We don't know. It's doing bizarre things. So Avi Loeb, before this, it's even gotten weirder in the last few weeks. Before that had a chance to happen, he put this possibility of 3I Atlas being out of 4 out of 1, 0 to 10. So he put it a 40% chance that it might be artificial. Okay. 60% chance it was natural, right? So all of this sort of talk about how he's a nut and how, his whole point of doing this was to get people aware that this could be something that we need to look for. And we should also be looking at these objects with an eye that there could be potentially technological uh, angle to the whole thing. Now, I don't intuitively, my intuition about 3I Atlas. And when 3 Atlas first happened and I was thinking about it, I had a few dreams about it that were weird. One was that I was in New York City looking up at the sky, and there was this massive asteroid that was about to hit the earth, and as it hit the earth, all of these like drone-like things started coming down and flying all over the place, which was strange. And I still don't know what that means exactly. So we'll see what that is. The other dream, the other thing I had, which was more like an out-of-body experience. So I've had a few of these where I was taken out of my body and I was on this ship. And it was a very funny, weird dream in that I was like, I woke up on the ship in like a cabin, and I was walking out with my dog, who for some reason was with me. And we were out in the cabin and out of the cabin onto this really long hallway, which led to an observation deck where there was a woman setting something up. And this man walked past me. It was all dressed, everybody was all dressed in white, and they looked pretty human, except for there were these little fine, weird lines on their face. Anyway, he's like, he was some kind of a teacher. I knew that. And he looks at me and goes, "Oh, we don't allow those little fascists on the on on board." I was talking about my dog. And I'm like, "Oh, well, he's really, really good dog. He's really, he's very well behaved." And he goes, "Okay, well." And so he let me. And so I walked on and I saw this woman putting up this weird, like holographic 3D solar system display, like an art project in this room that was like a sort of hangout room that had an observation deck where you could see out the stars. Now that I had right around the time that 3i Atlas was discovered, and I don't know if there's any correlation, but my intuition about whatever 3i Atlas is, it does not feel threatening in any way. I don't have a bad feeling about it, even though I had that strange dream. I think that dream might have been about the fact that there is some kind of what seems like a natural thing has an artificial component to it. And I do think that it's possible that whatever this is, it is probably some kind of natural asteroid or some kind of thing like that. And I take the same view as the guy from the Angry Astronaut that it does make sense that maybe it's a modified body that is some kind of probe, or like we threw out probes into the universe to try to see if there's life. This is something like that. And even if it was some kind of a spaceship, I don't have a feeling that it's here to do anything, any kind of harm to us, because the reason being it's not coming anywhere near us. It stays next to Mars, it's near Venus, and it's headed out past us at this point. So I don't get the feeling there's, any kind of danger to us at all. But it does feel like there is something weird about it. And I don't have the feeling that it is entirely natural either. And I don't feel like any kind of threatening thing from it. But I think there is potential that there's either technology or there could be beings on this thing, but I feel like there's no negative. I don't get the feeling there's anything negative. Now, the other thing I want to say is humanity has been plagued with bizarre UFO encounters and alien things since the beginning of time. And I talked a lot about that in my Substack, which I'm doing a bunch of pieces on that right now. If you want to learn about that, please subscribe to my Substack. And I'm going deep into all that. And I've had my own encounters, but whatever it is, this is 3i Atlas, is nothing to do with that phenomena. I don't believe it's related at all. And I don't believe that they're the same beings. I don't even think I think whatever is on 3i Atlas is very likely a much, it's very different than the kinds of things that have been experienced here, which is more like interdimensional kinds of experiences that people have had with beings that are probably more interdimensional, or at least have some kind of ability to bend space-time. 3i Atlas is not that. So that's just my take on that. So let's get back into this and then I will finish up. So the US Constitution signing chart, when we look at that for February of 2026 rather, and then into next summer, you can see that, let's see, where's the South Node is right there. Where's the sun and moon? Okay, so we got the 28 degrees. It's happening, this eclipse, in our first house. So that's an interesting thing. So that tells us that the identity of the nation changes. And Mars is right on that whole thing. The sun and moon have a 10-degree orb. And I would say this together, Mars would be pretty much, it's within conjunction here. So you have a new identity. Aquarius rules the population, it rules the people, it rules technology as well, but it does rule the people. And we have Pluto here and Saturn conjunct, or not really, they're kind of out. That's too loose, but Pluto is conjunct the ascendant and Saturn is in the first. And we've got Mars right at the midpoint here of that. And this eclipse is happening on Saturn, which rules our rules. Now, think about this. An Aquarius rising with Pluto and Saturn ruling how we see ourselves. We see ourselves as we the people. We have the power. Our laws are based on the people and serving the people. And an eclipse on that means we don't see things that way anymore. that we start to see that our laws do not serve us, making people angry. And I think this implies something kind of crazy happening around this period that will wake people up to um, things that, make people aware that of what's going on in a level that we haven't seen so far. So escalating this revelation. Pluto will be stationed in conjunction to in the 12th house, which I've been saying for a while. Pluto going in Aquarius through the 12th is people gathering in quiet, secretly behind the scenes, gathering their strength, gathering their sort of support systems. And as it goes over the first, not this year, not next year, but in 2028, as Mars here is conjunct the 7th house cusp and about to go over in that same period of time, we will have these things on the angle and another Uranus Mars opposition. That's 2028, the summer. That is an explosive period of time. But next summer, after this eclipse, and there's another eclipse, which I won't go into now, I'll come back to it some other time because I'm blabbing on and on. But if you look at this period of time in the summer, right around July 11th, it's I think it's this whole period leading up to this, you've got, I put the 11th because the moon triggers it in opposition that day, but this will be going on for really this summer. It's going to be Uranus and Mars will be conjunct starting all the way back in June, by the end of June, and into July. We're going to see people and things happening that I would say this is the beginning of a hot war. Okay. Now, I don't know what that means. It's also squaring the moon here. It can mean a number of things. All right. So this is an escalation. This is a big escalation. And it's not going to be like the other civil war, but maybe we'll see domestic violence, kind of domestic terrorist violence getting more extreme. Maybe we'll see more radicalization. Perhaps the protests will become skirmishes, or the Trump administration will do something unthinkable to the protesters. Something is going to ignite around the summer of 2026. And this is going to take it to the next level and ratchet everything up. Okay. By the time you get into 2028, when this same configuration comes all back, that summer of 2028, and you've got the same thing, you've got Uranus and Mars starting to conjunct, and Mars is on the sun. You've also got Pluto and Mars on the angles, which means the power of the people are showing themselves, and Mars is anger, right? And you've got this opposition, this kind of war stance between power dynamic of, this is a serious power dynamic, like a power struggle and a real fight for power. And you see here that Mars will join it, right, starting in June and going all through that summer as it gets closer to that stellium in Gemini. And you've got Pluto and Mars on the angles, and this is opposing the moon. Now, the moon and the 10th house is the executive branch, and the moon represents specifically the president. He's the face. He's the public face of the executive branch, the moon. The last time we saw that Uranus-Mars opposition was the start of the Civil War, back in the original Civil War. This is the first time we're going to see that Uranus-Mars conjunction opposing the moon in 2026 and in 2028 happening simultaneously. Now, I haven't checked to see in World War II when Uranus went over the 4th house cusp and we had Pearl Harbor, and that was the other time we had violence that started a war on our soil, and we staved off the violence happening on our soil by jumping into the war over there at the time. But you can also see another really weird thing about this, and that the Civil War, when we look at that time frame, which the sun, the progressed sun was conjunct the moon. And now we're watching as the sun is going to oppose the moon. So this is a culmination of what happened in the last Civil War. This is not going to be done during this period of time, but this period of time is going to lead to a period all these things culminate and we deal with the inequities that have plagued us since the last Civil War. So this is a long fight. And this is why I say it's really important for people to think about the country they want to live in. Think about how, as all of this unfolds, and as we get into this very precarious time period, which I haven't even dealt with bird flu yet in a long time, so I'm going to look into that. It's another point. Um, how are we going to? How are we going to reshape our institutions after this period of turbulence? What do we want our new governance to look like? I have ideas. I think you probably have ideas. We need to get rid of the electoral college. We need to maybe have a sanity test for the presidency so that you have to pass in a candidacy state. Everybody has to pass a litmus test of many different psychological exams and continue to be subjected to them throughout their presidency to make sure that they are mentally stable. We need to maybe go to more of a parliamentary system that we can yank people if they turn out to be insane. We need to have justices and people. We can't just have an impeachment process. That's not good enough. We have to hold people who are in positions of power to a higher standard rather than a lower one. And Supreme Court justices, not only all justices, not only need to be held accountable for their graft, their greed, their unethical behavior, but there has to be extreme punitive steps taken if they're found in those situations. And it can't be a long, labored, ridiculous process like impeachment. It has to be something much more direct and much more swift. And there needs to be an overarching board that that keeps control of all that stuff, that's totally unbiased, that has nothing to do with a government that is a secondary body of citizens that overlook it, and multiple different types of overarching, you know, uh, ethical observance of all of these different offices and stakeholders and people who are in positions of power that are held accountable to boards or something. I don't know. These are some ideas. We need to certainly get rid of big money politics. I think we need to go to a place where we have 100% publicly funded campaigns that are short. And like I said, people are weeded out if they have mental health problems. And if you go over a certain amount of money for your campaign, you should immediately be not just maybe fined the first time, and maybe second time you get some kind of sentencing. I think we need to be really hardcore and really, really stringent and strict with the people in power, because we're seeing what people in power, how they can really abuse it. And there's really not a lot of things we can do about it except for protest. The other thing I think is we really need to think about not just the people in power, but corporations and the corporate systems that are basically the way that our capitalistic structure is the foundation of it, how to tax and make sure that capitalism doesn't get completely out of control. We need a more social democracy style, Western democracy like Scandinavian countries have. We need universal health care. We need all of these things that have been put off and put off for generations now, because frankly, the people in our political system are bought and paid for by corporations, and they're not serving us anymore. People are suffering, and they have been for a long time, and it's only been getting worse and worse. So if you have any ideas, write them down, start a Substack, talk about it with other people, think about what this new democracy could be, because we're going to go through a period of turbulence, but we are going to have the opportunity to rewrite our future at the other side of this. So that's the good part, right? Okay, blessings to all of you. There's a lot of craziness coming, and I'll see you soon. All right, take care. And if you haven't already subscribed to my YouTube channel, please do and like it. I hate to do that, but I think it's helpful if you want me to continue making content like that. And if you haven't subscribed to my Substack, please do. And there is a free, you can subscribe for free, or you can become a paid subscriber, which is not expensive. It's very inexpensive, like $2 a week or something like that. And you get a lot of content. Everything I don't say here is said in my Substack, and there's some pretty crazy stories. So I hope all of you have a great week. Blessings to all of you. You're in my prayers. God bless America. God bless the world. God bless all the little animals and the children and the people. And may we find peace and prosperity and happiness for everyone across the board, for Earth to come back into balance. We can make it happen if we have the will. I believe that, but we are going to have to get through this very turbulent period first. Okay, blessings to all of you. Take care.